Yeah, I slept in a dumpster one night. It sucked. I was young. I just drove out to LA to try to get into the entertainment industry. I had no money, and it's a story that I've told a handful of times throughout my career, but I've never actually gone fully into the details. And I recently mentioned it on a podcast that I did with Perch. So happy to talk about it here. I figured it'd be kind of a cool topic. Before I get into that, I wanted to say thank you again for your support on the plot holes. The Indiegogo campaign, as of this morning, has about 155,000, which is amazing. So we've still got, I think 45, 50 days left to go. So I don't want to overdo it with a lot of white noise. Just wanted to give you a quick update and say thank you. So there I was in LA. It was 2 a.m. with my friend who wanted to be an actor. We each had our cars loaded up with everything we owned. We were commuting down from Santa Barbara, which is a hell of a drive, and we didn't feel like going back. We had been spending that previous month sleeping outside, sleeping in our cars, sleeping on the ground underneath picnic tables in rest areas, trying to save as much money as we possibly could because we were both dirt poor. And that one night, I saw some kind of a dumpster treatment plant where they cleaned dumpsters or they were freshly painted. So it wasn't like I slept in a dumpster that was full of shit. It was like the best kind of dumpster you could possibly sleep in. And if you've ever fell on hard times or slept outdoors, or hopefully you haven't, but after a month of doing that, a dumpster seemed like a great option because it was contained, it was shelter, it kept the rain off your head. No one was going to try to fuck with us in the middle of the night, or something weird happening, or some animal, or whatever it was. And we're in the middle of West Hollywood at 2 a.m. with nowhere to sleep, and a nice clean dumpster was actually the best option. So we slept in a dumpster. How did I get there? So let's rewind a bit. My upbringing was I grew up in the woods of New England. My dad was a blue-collar / white-collar headhunter. He made a good living back in the 80s. So even though I had a great childhood and never wanted for much, he was very hard on my sister and I. And even though he made a good living, he did not want to give us anything that we didn't earn ourselves. So he was pretty hardcore. He was almost like, it was like having a boomer dad who was more like a Depression era survivor type of dad. And for example, I remember my best friend got this pair of hiking boots that I really wanted. I got them for a Christmas gift. It was my only gift that year, and it was great. I'm not complaining. And if my father's watching this, I don't know what you're doing on YouTube anyway. Get the fuck out of here. So I was really happy to get these boots. And then my best friend got the same pair, not for Christmas, not for his birthday, but just because he needed them. And this was kind of my childhood. Was my parents used to drill into me that I had to earn everything from myself, never take money or accept things from people, and you always have to pay people back. And they were very scrupulous, or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm trying not to say the word cheap, but that's a good way to say it. Anyway, so a lot of the other things that they did right was drill into me the business side of things. So my father said, if you want to go to art school, I'm fine with that. You seem to like art, but you better make money at it. You need to make sure that you're going to pay attention to the business side as well as the creative side. He had some background in art, so he kind of understood the itch. He never followed through with his watercolor painting in the way that he wanted, so having a son going to art school was kind of a cool thing for him, assuming that I could get a job doing it afterwards. So I went to Savannah College of Art. I spent a lot of money on an education. My father paid for some of it. I got a lot of scholarships that paid for my bit of it. I still had to work at like Home Depot, or I think I was landscaping for a summer, just to make money to pay for my classes. A lot of my friends, again, had parents who would supply everything for them. These kids had brand new cars. They could afford steak every night, surf, whatever they wanted. And meanwhile, like, I had to hustle my ass off just to keep pace with them. Sorry, I just had to kill a fly. So when I graduated, I had to get the fuck out of Savannah. just did not fit in the South. The pace was too slow and relaxed for me. I was angry, fast-talking, New England type of guy. And I was so afraid of not being able to get into comics, I thought, why don't I move to LA, which is a big entertainment town, and try to get work as a concept artist or a storyboard artist, because that seemed to me like a better idea than sitting around Savannah or going back home to New Hampshire, which is even worse. So my buddy and I, he wanted to go there and be an actor. So he hopped in his Saturn, I hopped in my Honda CRX. I loaded everything into that car that I owned, including like a 26-inch tube television in the passenger seat. And man, the wheels were, it was so heavy, the wheels were almost scraping up against the fenders. It was crazy. And we drove out across country. It took us about 5 to 6 days, I think. Halfway through, I realized, I checked my email and I saw that I had a gig for Dark Horse, drawing a book for their Rocket Comics line called Crush. Don't go looking for it. I'm embarrassed by the quality of this artwork. So just skip over this part and let's get to the rest of the story. But the good news about it was I knew I was guaranteed a couple $100 per page once I found a place to work. So even though I didn't have any money, I had a lead on a job. It was going to be for 4 issues. There was no guarantee of anything after that. So I knew that if I could get to LA and not spend money and start working and handing pages in, I would have about 4 or 5 months of work. And then I could worry about what I'm supposed to do to get paid to do storyboards or finding jobs at Fox Animation or whatever it was at the time. So on the way out, we didn't want to stay in hotels or motels because we couldn't or wouldn't want to afford it. So we ended up sleeping in rest areas. And man, I empathize with homeless people. I mean, I've only had to do it for maybe a month or two, but the world changes when you start to look around at night and think, where could I fall asleep, be unconscious for 6 hours, and not get fucked with, or peed on, or kicked by somebody, or spotted by the cops, or fire department, or some angry owner of the property is going to see me, and trying to fall asleep when you're afraid is really, really shitty. Even if you're sleeping in your car, it's a little bit better, but being woken up in the middle of the night by angry cops is really fucking scary. So, but that's what we wanted to do. We were going to be hardcore about it and save money, and that's how we went across the country. And each night we would scope out rest areas, find places where we could maybe sleep on the grass in a blanket, and got woken up by rain a few times. And honestly, it was kind of fun. I knew the punk rocker in me was like, yeah, this is what artists need to do. Like, you gotta get back to reality. And I had this white collar upbringing, but now I know what life is really like. So part of me was kind of enjoying it. I think I was keeping a journal every day, which I've never read since. But after a while, it kind of sucks and it wears on you, and you smell like shit, and you walk into a restaurant and people look at you weird, and that kind of lifestyle takes over. And being homeless like that, I can see why it would be a devastating cycle and really hard to get out of. Luckily, my hardship was only temporary because I had this Dark Horse gig. So I get out to LA. My roommate and I start looking for all kinds of places. We ended up finding an apartment in West Hollywood eventually. This is after I slept in a dumpster. We shared a small apartment. We were both 2 dudes living in West Hollywood, so everybody thought we were gay, which is fine. We don't give a shit. He actually went on to start his acting career, and I managed to eventually get onto my Dark Horse gig. So I finished my Dark Horse stuff, and I thought that I had sunk my hooks in, and I thought that I was going to, now I had made it. And I knew that it wouldn't be easy. I knew that I would still have struggles, but I felt like I had my first published work out. It was professionally colored, professionally lettered, paid for it. Well, I hadn't been paid for it yet, and I'll get to that in a second. But I thought, it's hard to slip back from this at least. If I can at least find one of these gigs once a year, then I can survive. And again, I would be surviving, but it would be poverty level income. I'd still have to go to shows and slog it and try to always live hand to mouth. I had no idea how I was ever going to afford to buy a house or afford to have kids or afford to get married or anything like that, afford vacations or health insurance or even having pets. I just knew that in my early to mid 20s, this was a step up. And technically, I'm a professional comic book artist, so I'm happy. Fast forward to a few months later, it's San Diego Comic-Con. And living in LA, you just drive down, or I'm just going to take the bus, which is a huge mistake, or you take the train, which I couldn't afford. So my publisher was like 3 months late paying me. And I remember at night just waking up terrified in my apartment, and I would go to parties and I would end up getting drunk, and I'd go out to my car and I would call my father and say, like, I haven't been paid, I don't know what I did wrong, like I worked my ass off with these people, and you know, like if I might need to borrow money. And he's like, well, I don't like lending money. And I'm like, I know, and I hate to ask because I know the way I was raised, but like I literally did everything right and I worked my ass off, and it's not my fault that I don't have money. I only had like $600 in my bank account at that time. I had a Best Buy application in my hand. I had a book that was about to come out. And, you know, I'm good with Dark Horse now. This isn't me throwing them under the bus at all. I'd love to work with them maybe again one day, maybe do some Hellboy. So, yeah, this isn't meant to be a take on them because things happen and I get it. So he ended up lending me money, a loan, and I was able to afford to go down to San Diego. And I had to go down there because at the time, that was the only place I knew I could get work. San Diego was a big deal back then. It wasn't, you know, Big Bang Theory big. It was just before Hollywood really started hitting it hard. And it used to be a place where you could go meet people after the show, meet editors, and possibly stir up some work. So I wasn't going to party or to relax. I was going to find my next gig. And I had to make that clear to my father, and he got it, so he sent me some money and I was able to go. And again, he didn't send me a lot, just barely enough to get by. So I went to San Diego, I think it was 2002, 2003, and I had a crazy time. I remember not getting a lot of sleep, being drunk a lot. I remember being at a dinner, actually, I don't know how I got there, with maybe Bruce Timm, and no, he wasn't there. There was some other big pro, and he asked me if I wanted dessert, and I told him I couldn't afford dessert. I was actually just eating bread out of the basket at the restaurant because I was at a dinner where everyone else was a pro except for me, and I didn't want to ask anybody for money. I was just going to quietly say, oh yeah, I already ate, I'm just going to snack on the bread, and then I was going to go scrounge for, I don't know, a candy bar later. So I finished up the convention, and I remember we tried to go surfing the next day, and my friend who was surfing with me, who was also poor, got stung by a stingray at like 4:30 in the morning, and so there was a medical emergency to start the day off. I remember not getting a lot of sleep. I went to the show like a zombie, and it was basically the worst 24 to 36 hours of my entire life. Without any sleep at all. I had woken up at dawn, gone surfing, my friend got injured, that sucked, for him especially, obviously. Going to the convention, trying to stir up more work, not finding much, having to run, barely catch my Greyhound bus back up north. Border Patrol pulls us over. I'm the only non-Latino on the bus, so the cops basically are like, oh yeah, you're white, you're obviously a citizen. So I have every single Mexican person on that bus like hating me for the rest of the ride. I end up at the bus station in LA for Greyhound. I don't know if it's any better now, but it was like third world country. People with like chickens and crates, and nobody spoke English except for one other white guy who was a security guard there. And I had no money, my cell phone was dead, and I literally didn't have enough money to make a phone call to call my roommate to come and get me. Again, it was the scariest thing. It was the worst moment of my entire life. I had to go up to this security guard, this other white guy who was the only one that spoke English, and say, I'm not usually like this. I need to borrow money to get on the bus. I need like $5. Can you please lend me $5? Like, give me your name and address. I will mail it to you. I'm so sorry. And I knew he could see I was startled. He knew that like I wasn't supposed to be in that that bus station, or rather, I was not the normal type of person stuck there. And he didn't ask for it back, which was really nice. To this day, if he's watching this, I'll happily send you that money back. And I was able to beg to get money, to get on a bus, to ride through LA, to get back to Hollywood. And I remember having to walk another half hour because I overshot my place, which was my fault. And going to sleep that night. And if you ever had a really long day, you're thinking, man, I'm so tired, I can't even sleep. Like, was it really this morning when I woke up to surf in San Diego before my friend got stabbed by a stingray? And that was definitely the bottom for me. That whole stage of my career was, poor student, living homeless for a while, sleeping in a dumpster. And then that night, dumpster was nothing compared to that night where I almost had like an emotional breakdown. Like, it just sucked. And so I think the reason I wanted to tell that story is because I think people think of my career, and I'm thankful for this, starting from Joe the Barbarian to, Batman, which is great. But that's really half of it. The first half was dumpsters, stingrays, poor, begging for work, doing books for Dark Horse, and then never being heard from again. Writing and drawing my own book for Oni Press. For $3,000, I got paid for a year and a half of work. So I don't even know how I survived. And then it was disappear back into obliviousness. And then I would get a chance to draw Batman Scarecrow Year 1 with Bruce Jones. And I thought, all right, I'm a DC. Now I've made it. I worked through Christmas. I worked 6-7 days a week. I wasn't late. And the book came and went, and I got no offers again for years from DC. And then I would get an offer from them to do Teen Titans. So I did 2 issues of Teen Titans, and I would try to draw DC's house style, and I just wasn't good at it. It just didn't feel natural. But I was willing to sacrifice my artistic vision just to feed myself, basically. And then the Teen Titans book never came out. I got paid for it, but it was like, man, I'm hitting all these roadblocks. Like, what the fuck is it going to take? And I knew I was angry and pissed off. And honestly, if Twitter was a thing back then, I would be just another angry, ragey liberal out there. Just, fuck it, I'm not making money doing this. I'm not getting respect. Well, I'm going to get respect for being mad. I would be one of those people. Luckily, Twitter came of age now that I'm old enough to know better than to tweet certain things. But I can absolutely see why a lot of these pros get caught up in the rage machine of Twitter. I get it. I'm not saying they should do it, but I understand the value, or so-called value, that they perceive from it. This is all they have. So honestly, I really just struggled to get by making, between 20 and 40 a year for a long time. Still no health insurance, still barely able to scrape by, having to do shows, praying that I could at least do a show and make my money back for the cost of a table, at least. So it was a scary time, and that's why, I took my hard knocks a lot early in my career, and it's funny, when I first met Scott Snyder, who had he arrived in comics and he was just like that, I remember thinking, man, I can tell, and I told him this, I can tell that he hasn't struggled like I have, nor should anybody, by the way. And by the way, my story is not the worst. Like, when I heard the stuff that James O'Barr went through for The Crow, that's way worse than anything I went through. But I guess the reason I'm telling this story is because I've thrown out the dumpster thing a lot as a joke, and most people have no idea what I'm talking about. So hopefully this gives you some context. So, do I regret those early years? No, it hardened me a lot and made me suspicious, skeptical, and really didn't leave a lot of room for me to feel egotistical or arrogant about my stuff. When I speak about things I'm doing now, hopefully it doesn't come across as arrogant, but as I have worked hard enough to say, I know what I'm doing. I have the track record to prove X, Y, and Z. I still make mistakes and I'm still learning. By no means do I have it figured out. But I'm glad for those tough years. At the time, it sucked completely. And if I had a time machine and go back and tell myself, hey, I know it's a slog right now, but this is going to harden you in ways that not many of your contemporaries are gonna, it's either gonna make or break you type of thing. That would have been nice to know, but of course you don't know that when you're stuck in the maw like that. So when it came to when finally one day Karen Berger from Vertigo called me and she said, I have this gig I want you to do. It wasn't Joe the Barbarian, it was something else that of course fell through again. So when Joe finally happened and I got the script from Grant and I got a good decent page rate and I knew it was 8 issues, that's at least a year of work, and I signed up for DC's health insurance program, which freelancers used to be able to have. It was expensive, but I finally had health insurance. I felt like my head was above water for the first time ever. I think I made 70 or 80 that year, and it was more money than I had ever thought I would ever be making. Even though I was raised in a white collar household, sort of resigned myself to a life of poverty. I just got over the fact that, hey kid, you're never going to make as much money as your parents did. If you're going to want to do this, you better do it because you love it, not because you'll get rich. So I just said goodbye to money and wealth forever. That's why everything that's been happening lately is such a surprise to me. But yeah, I think about that dumpster a lot. I think about, my emotional breakdown and being stuck at that Greyhound station. Yeah, I don't know, man. There's not really much of a story to this. I guess the rest is history, if you've read Joe the Barbarian and followed my career from this point on. But, the other value of this story for me is, you see this Indiegogo campaign, you see Batman, you see my, the crazy studio, this was not handed to me at all. I've worked hard for this stuff. I make no apologies about it. I'm very happy to share this stuff with people. I'm not trying to brag that I've had a rough go of it or anything like that. Really, it's just to describe my entry into this weird world and why I think the way I do, why I act the way I do, talk the way I do, why I seem. A lot of people say that I don't come across like an artist. I come across more like a business person, or someone who's more alpha male. It's like, this is the way it should be. Sorry kid, it's not going to be easy, that kind of thing. Suck it up. I don't have any patience for artsy fartsiness, and I think this is why. It's just that the mentality that I developed in order to get here has served me so well that I don't intend on leaving it ever. I wish I could be a more relaxed person. I wish I could not be so skeptical and inwardly angry at certain things and want to poke the hornet's nest every so often on social media. I wish I wasn't like that, but being like this has served me well. It has given me a lot to say with books like Punk Rock Jesus, Batman, and Next with the Plot Holes. So, yeah, so that's the story about the dumpster. I hope you all enjoyed it. Next time you see someone calling me some privileged, whatever, some guy who's had a golden road into comics, that is not true, and you can assure them that, and send them to this video. So, thanks again. Thanks again for backing the plot holes, and I'll see you next time.